Okay, so the budget has been released, and we have here Mark Humphrey Jenner. In Australia, we have a lot of hacks, and Mark is definitely not one of them. This is by far the most intelligent, on point. There's a huge difference. This is our Roger Federer. This is our Kelly Slater. This is by far the best we have in Australia. By far, by far. Every time I look around, this guy just keeps kicking goals and being so accurate. Um, we're going to have a look at the budget, and we're going to try to read between the lines of what Mark is really saying here.
With this revenue surplus really matters. And if we look at what they've done, well, they've baked in more of a structural deficit. So as Richard Holden, for example, remarked, revenue is for now, but spending is forever. So they've baked in a lot of long-term spending. So for example, NDIS growing at 10% per year. And that type of thing just all adds up. And it's not just one thing, it's everything. Now, the big problem with this as well is all of those measures, well, they're not really pro-growth. Because if you're going to...
Yeah, there's no growth being baked into the cake here. It is all the money is going into things that are just not capitalism. It's basically communism. It's about spending what money we have now and giving it to the boomers, basically, giving it to the old people, just allowing the people with the parasitic rent seekers, like the people who are owning properties, just not taxing them enough and taxing people who are actually trying to build the country. And I'm just going to take another leap forward and just go, I'm assuming that the people who are running this country, who are not Australians, are deliberately destroying our businesses and protecting the rent seekers in order to create some sort of a feudal system here. And you can see it. You can see it. You can just see it.
Spend money and it generates growth, then we can talk about that, right? But if you're going to spend money and it isn't generating growth, and also more perniciously, they're actually bringing in tax measures that would be undermining growth, so Division 296, for example, that's going to make things worse. So it's very much a problem with what they've done with the money.
Okay, so the thing that gets me is with
so obviously he's well spoken and very diplomatic, but basically you can see what he's saying there. He's just saying, look, every country should be protecting the entrepreneurs, the people building businesses, keeping the people who are working and using their brains, people at the cutting edge of industry. These are the people that we should be protecting, not the rent-seeking parasites, and not just spending money and just giving it to your buddies, and that's basically communism. That's socialist, communist sort of thinking, and it's really bad for Australia. It's the investment that we need now and the protection for entrepreneurs. It's not happening, which means Australia does not have a future at all. It's actually really sad seeing what's going on here.
Significant debts coming, and then with also the deficits that are coming, it makes Australia highly vulnerable to any economic shock. And the second thing as well is it makes that budget especially vulnerable to any blowouts in unemployment. They're forecasting 4.25% all the way out. So they're expecting that money to keep on coming. If anything goes awry with the employment market, the government and the budget are in big strife.
Well, if anything goes awry with employment, with capital growth, with tariffs, with China, with a whole lot of things, the budget just goes awry. So they really haven't factored in a whole lot of those
Yeah, so what he did mention there was it's not an accident that he mentioned those specific talking points. It's not just unemployment. He kind of glazed over that because a large part of this economy is just socialist. It's just giving women jobs that they don't deserve, DEI, giving Africans jobs, giving welfare to parasitic immigrants. But then he touched on a few things. Tariffs, China. Basically what he said there was he should have said, well, we're a communist country, and as a communist country we're not really growing the economy or thinking about the future, but if there's any geopolitical threats, the country just suffers massively, puts us into more debt. And who does that benefit? The United States.
Tail events, or even not tail events, just downside risks. And it does make the budget rather vulnerable, rather powerless going forward.
So it was interesting that S&P Global Ratings today reasserted Australia's AAA credit rating. So this is important for the government, but also said that, look, even if something went wrong, Australia, as compared with other countries around the world, has a significant capacity to borrow. But it seems, I think, that would trouble a lot of Australians to recognise that the government's only way out of any sort of problem in the future would be to borrow. It could arguably tax people more, but we're already one of the highest tax countries in the world, and competitiveness is fundamentally Australia's problem right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So say we go down the higher tax revenue. Well, we have to think about, I guess, the anecdotal type idea of the Laffer curve, right? In that the higher your tax rate gets, then both A, the lower your growth rate gets, but also B, the lower your total tax rate might be as growth slows down and people aren't working those extra hours.
Okay, can I stop you there? Isn't the irony of...
And he's also talking about people who are actually working for it, instead of taxing the parasites holding all the assets.
that then if you were to lower taxes, you would improve, though the government might get a little bit less in the short term, it would increase economic activity, it would boost economic growth, and the government would end up collecting more. Isn't that what the whole economic argument should be?
Absolutely. So one wonders whether just addressing bracket creep might in fact almost pay for itself, because people would be incentivized to go out and work another hour. They'd be incentivized to take more risk. They'd be incentivized to work harder and get that promotion.
All right, but then if you actually cut taxes to business, which might not be electorally palatable to the government to do, a Labor government to do that, but if they did that, made their companies more competitive, some might not take their...
It depends on what kind of businesses are getting taxed and what kind of businesses are not being taxed. There's a guy called Gary Economics who's just become famous in Britain at the moment. He's basically a communist that doesn't know jack shit. Actually, you know what? I honestly think that Gary Economics, if you've heard of this guy, he's become famous now overnight, and he's in the media, he's doing podcasts. I think he's a plant by the government. And what they're doing in Britain right now is basically what the government is doing here in Australia. Legit, just squeezing the population of real Australians, making sure that we're poor, taxing the real people that are actually working, while protecting the people who are holding the assets. It's a delicate balancing act in order to keep the power, and that's what I really think is going on here.
Capital overseas, but leave it here and invest it and try and earn their money here and create jobs here rather than overseas.
100%. So say you look at the US, their corporate tax rate is 21%. Vietnam, notably the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, their corporate tax rate is 20%. Same with the capital gains.
So, like, this is a diplomat here. This is a professional. He just signaled something very, very obvious to you guys. Let's see if I can rewind and play that again.
Tax rate. So Australia at its 30% for effectively
here and invest it and try and earn their money here and create jobs here
Sorry, let's watch this again.
rather than overseas.
100%. So say you look at the US, their corporate tax rate is 21%. Vietnam, notably the Socialist Republic of Vietnam, their corporate tax rate is 20%. Same with the capital gains tax rate. So Australia at its 30% for effectively investment earnings with the corporation and for large corporations is much above many of the peer countries.
So
Many of the peer countries. Did you guys see what he did there? Did you see it? You got to understand. Okay, this guy, this is Mark Humphrey Jenner. Okay, this is not a slouch. This is a legit genius. Now, I think he's got a PhD in economics, PhD in finance. I think he's got a master's degree in law. I think he's also got a master's in accounting as well, or tax. You name it, he's covered it. And now he's a lecturer. He's a professor. By far, probably one of the most educated people on planet Earth. What what he did there? Okay, he basically. He said that Vietnam, by the way, if you know anything about Vietnam, there's another reason why he mentioned Vietnam instead of China. He didn't mention Indonesia. He didn't mention Singapore or Hong Kong. why did he mention Vietnam? Well, Vietnam's a developing country, right? They got 100 million people. Their country's got low tax rates. They're educating their people. They're building entrepreneurs throughout the whole. If you know what's going on in Vietnam, Vietnam's killing it right now. They're kicking goals. It is right now. Just every aspect of Vietnam is by far my favorite country in Asia right now. They're killing it right now. Now, it's a socialist country. It's a communist country. They have agreements with communist Russia for visas. There's lots of Russians going there at the moment. Yet, economically, Australia is more communist than Vietnam. And then at the end, Mark actually said, he goes, Australia has a higher tax rate on, I guess, entrepreneurs and businesses than their peer countries in the region. Peer as in other communist countries. So basically, like I don't want to put words in his mouth, but what I heard there, and when I read between the lines, is Australia is very, very much a communist country. I've been saying it for many years. This tells you all you need to know by a real professional, an expert in finance and economics, and he's basically saying that by protecting the elites and the cabal and the oligarchs that hold the assets in this mixture of a feudalist dictatorship communist dictatorship that we have in Australia, in a way, what it sounds to me, what he's saying is that, like most pathetic, weak communist dictatorships, the slightest little tip, geopolitical push can tip it over the edge. And that's kind of what he's hinting there. We need real entrepreneurs building businesses, making Australia more resilient to any external threats economically.
So as again, come back to this notion of competitiveness, because we are in a global environment. Businesses have a chance as to where they invest. Therefore, if energy policy in America, if IR policy in America, if tax policy in America is better, the money naturally moves there.
Absolutely. So just look at James Hardie, for example. Its investor is trying to do an acquisition in the United States. Now, the market was a little bit nonplussed about the price tag, but still, they're expanding in the US. Many other companies are expanding in the US. Part of it's tariffs, part of it's the attractive business environment.
So this is the
So, yeah, because, proper entrepreneurs building businesses, they're not going to stay in Australia when it's a communist dictatorship that taxes them heavily. So what do? They get up and go. There's that shill. I don't know. I haven't figured out exactly who he works for. It's really hard to figure out these days. They're quite good at hiding the paper trail. But that guy, Gary Economics in Britain, he's basically saying the same thing. Oh, we need to tax people. Well, what does that do? It sends all of the big businesses, somewhere better. Dubai, the United States. So the government's policies right now are to incentivize the entrepreneurs, the people who will be hiring you and protecting you against the government, really, because your best defense against the government is having entrepreneurs that can hire you, and then you're not reliant on the government. You're not reliant on Medicare and welfare, and you're not reliant on anything else that the government controls, because when they control everything, they have contempt for you, and next thing you know, you got more lockdowns. Next thing you know, you got 1984. You've got a Orwellian nightmare like we've already suffered down here because we're a communist dictatorship. Those people are going to go to the United States. They're going to go to Dubai. They're going to chase low tax environments. And those entrepreneurs are going to take their cash, take their jobs, take their innovations, and take everything out of the country. And the people who run Australia, they don't just because the people who run Australia doesn't mean that they want the best for Australia. They could be working for the United States to incentivize the best and the brightest to leave Australia. Keep in mind, I'm not in Australia anymore. I suggest you start thinking about doing the same thing as well. The only people left might be people who will be writing the next Gulag archipelago. You get where we're going here. You know, when you listen to these finance guys and you try to read between the lines, you can kind of see the truth, and they will tell you what's up.
The most interesting part about this, because this is the absolute key of this budget, and Australians know about competition. They should understand this as well. Mark Humphrey, Jeanette, many thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me. Great being here. So there we go. The Australian government is not exactly getting high marks for its budget. It involves a lot more spending, but not spending that's necessarily going to create more economic growth. Rather, just spending that's going to add to the deficit and potentially add to the structural deficit, something that many areas of the media have been at pains to point out. Part of the disappointing part of this budget, of course, is it does nothing to really encourage economic growth. For example, it doesn't extend the instant asset write-off that small businesses would have liked, which would have encouraged small businesses to go and buy more products in order to grow their businesses. It also does nothing to address things such as bracket creep, which might have otherwise encouraged people to work harder or work more hours or go out and take more risk. However, the government appears to become addicted to increased tax revenue. And hence, why there's been a general lack of enthusiasm for this budget, and hence why the government...
Yeah, it's a communist dictatorship. Building what is a feudal society, a somewhat feudal society. It's definitely communist, definitely socialist, and definitely Orwellian, and a little bit scary. So anyway, guys, I'll see you guys next one.